Welcome to Truth with Media. I'm Jenny. I'm the host for today's show. And today we have a very honored guest, Mr. Dan Cox. And he is a current Maryland State delegate. And he's a constitutional attorney. And more importantly, he's a brother in Christ. And we pay special attention when we have Christians running for office. Let's first welcome Dan.
Thank you so much, Jenny. It's an honor to be on your show.
Thank you. Would you please introduce yourself a little bit?
Well, sure. I am privileged to be a husband and father with my wife to 10 children. Well, our 10th baby is due any day. And our oldest son is 24. Our youngest son is 3, except for the one that's going to be born. So, and I am privileged also to be a small businessman. I've run my own law firm for 16 years, served many different aspects of civil law, including helping churches, helping Christians, helping farmers, helping business people, and individuals who need access to justice. So I've been privileged to do that, and I've had the background of training with a great university called Regent University in Virginia Beach. And Jay Sekulow, you might have heard of, was one of my professors. And they have a worldwide ministry outreach. They also have campuses, I think, in South Korea and other places in the world. But they are an ABA accredited law school, and I was privileged to graduate from there and go on to practice law. And in that capacity, I've also then had an opportunity to serve in the legislature. I've always been politically involved since my grandmother took me along when I was 5 years old with her to go door knocking and hand out little pamphlets. And that was back in 1980 with Ronald Reagan. And since then, I've always stayed abreast of politics and worked in different ways to help out when I could. And in college, became more involved with my political science degree background. So, but we are, as I mentioned to you a minute ago, both of our fathers, my wife and myself, both of our fathers are pastors. And so everything that we do, we believe is for the glory of God and to serve him in this world and to serve his people and those who he's calling, and also the world that's very needy, very much in need of leadership, very much in need of love and the reflection of Christ. So I believe that politics is a mission field just like any other.
Wow. Yeah, I was just going to ask you, because some Christians, they said, we just pray. So we shouldn't go into politics. It's like a very dirty field where you will get stuck and you will become bad. And so how did you have this idea of running for the governor of Maryland?
Well, I'll start with the first part, and that is if politics is dirty and not for Christians. And I would say that itself is political. As we know, Dietrich Bonhoeffer, the great Christian saint from Germany, who stood up against Hitler. And he said, and he's very famous for this quote, "Silence in the face of evil is evil." So in other words, the Christian doctrine is that we are to be a light in society. We're not to cover our light of Christ. We're to be out there shining for him in the city gates and around our workplace, and whatever we do, we're not to be silent. We're not to allow the devil to have any foothold of evil. We're to always proclaim the kingship of the Lord and the love of Christ over everyone, because he made us in the imago Dei, the image of God. And that's really what led me to be in politics. I mean, obviously, we have different fields. Some people like to go in business, and I actually was an athlete in college. So I had dreams of going to the Olympic Games, and that didn't play out for me because the Lord had other plans. And so after I had an injury in the decathlon, I decided to devote my energies more to the study of political science and law. And that intersects really with faith, because without faith, it's impossible to please the Lord. And without obedience on earth to God's principles, we're not exercising faith. And so for someone who wants to avoid politics, they're going to end up having a real struggle with faith, because how are they going to decide what their children are taught if the government says they have to be indoctrinated in school, when God says that that's not what a Christian is allowed to do? So there are many different aspects, obviously, with the Christian faith that would intersect politics. And that's kind of what spurred me on in the legislature of Maryland to really serve Maryland and serve all people for his glory, and to do my best with that. I'm obviously not perfect at it, but we do kill a lot of bad bills that are just very negative for the family, negative for the church, negative for our country, taking away our First Amendment freedoms, taking away other Bill of Rights freedoms. These are all things that militate against the gospel, really, and most importantly, against the human being that God has made. And so that's why some people say, well, how can you be a Christian and be in politics? And my question back is, how can you be a Christian and not be in politics in some way? Because politics is everything. Politics is you being alive and breathing and deciding what to do in the morning, and how to teach your children, and how to run your business. And all of that can either be negative and bad, or it can be for God's glory. And so to the second part of your question is running for governor. And what happened was we had 20 months of a loss of freedoms. We had a significant need that we would uphold the Constitution. And in seeking to uphold the Constitution, we waited and searched to see if anyone was going to run on those freedom issues of the Constitution for our Republican Party, and no one was. And I, of course, kept getting lots of people lobbying me to run for governor. And so at the end of the day, my wife and I prayed sincerely. We sought the Lord about it and got a lot of advice and counsel, and put off the decision for a couple months, and then realized that it was time to move forward to defend our Constitution and to uphold, our liberties. So that's how we ended up running. And in the process of that, we found a great running mate, a lieutenant governor candidate who also believes in freedom, who also escaped communism, actually, with her husband and other individuals, like some of your listeners may be aware of, individuals who may have escaped communism, but she came from Yugoslavia, and she grew up under communism, and she knows the oppression. She knows the lack of food. She knows the lack of civil rights and the lack of faith. Her parents had been forced to be atheist, and she came to Christ as a 22-year-old and joined the Orthodox Church at that time. And since then, she and her husband have done everything they can to raise their children in freedom, and very, very much hit it off with my wife and I. So, because that's what we do as we look forward to the future. We want our children to embrace the things of God, which means embracing freedom, because it's through Christ we're set free.
Yeah, I totally agree. Coming back to the faith question, I know you grew up in pastor's house, but personally, how did you encounter God? How did you encounter Christ?
So I was raised in a pastor's home, like you said. I actually went to Bible college when I was 2 years old. I always say that as a joke. My father was in Bible college and preparing for seminary, and so he took me along to classes. But when I was 5 years old, I made a profession of faith and gave my heart to Christ. I remember that to this day. But obviously, growing up, you don't always walk with the Lord. And so when I was 12, I made a rededication and was baptized in the Christian faith in a very cold mountain stream. And that was a very big part of really my formation of trust in the Lord and proclamation of that. And then went through my teen years and began to grow in the Lord, and had additional times of just rejuvenation and a rededication of my faith So when I was 19, I remember once again just coming home from college. I was going to Mount St. Mary's University, and I was working 2 or 3 jobs at the time as a lifeguard and a waiter, and also as a farmhand for, on our, because we actually raised beef and some animals for my father. So I remember coming home from work one night and knowing, I've always known that I've, since a young child, trusted Christ as my Savior. But I remember coming home and realizing that, you know what, this isn't a game. I came from classes and then I went to work, and the classes that I was in had some elements of paganism that we had to study in American in ancient history, and went over some of that. And I remember contemplating that in context with a real surrender to Christ and living vibrantly as best as we can for him, with full surrender, with a sense of dedication to doing his will. And as a 19-year-old, that really was a time when I remember the Lord just really moving in my heart that way. And I felt the Holy Spirit just encouraging me to just give everything to him, not just in part, and not just, to make sure I'm saved or going to heaven or anything like that, but instead to really be his vessel and say, Lord, do what you will. I'm here to serve you. That's what my life is for, to glorify you and enjoy you forever. And God did that, and he encouraged me in that. And I had a time of just continued growth in my spiritual walk. And then a couple years later, married my beautiful bride, Valerie, and we started out our lives together. Now we've been married 26 years this June. And we have like I mentioned, expecting our 10th child, little boy, hopefully in the next week or so. So God's been very gracious. We've wanted to use everything that we have for him and live for him. And by his grace, we're seeking to do that. But that's obviously a real testament to raising children in the faith. I'm very grateful for my parents. So is my wife. She's very grateful for her parents, who took the time to read the Word of God, to pray, to have a daily pattern that would instruct us in how to think and how to consider and how to respect one another and respect God, and to listen to his word, and to not be rebellious against the King of Heaven, who, as he said to the Apostle Paul when he was on the road to Damascus as Saul, he said, why are you kicking against the goats? How can you fight the King of Heaven? You can't. And that's what's so wonderful about serving him. He is the King, and he is in control. And I know that is a blessing of the Christian family, to be able to raise children that way. And honestly, a little segue in your question, to try to be concise, is that this also relates to education, and why I'm so passionate about advancing free education and educational choice for parents. Because if you force parents into a mold where they have to send their children to the government schools, you really rob them of the opportunities to have the choice of homeschool programs, of Christian school programs, and of alternative and charter school programs, which allow the parent to be more involved, to direct the curriculum, to have a sense of Christian training rather than indoctrination by the state. And all of that is part of the formation of the child. And we know this to be true in statistical and science studies back through the last 100 years or so, since John Dewey really unfortunately perverted the United States education system and moved it more towards an authoritarian structure. And it's been great to be part of that homeschool and Christian school movement in the last 40 years, where my father in 1983 founded the homeschool movement in Maryland with the freedom of regulations, and worked very hard to get those Code of Maryland regulations established for homeschooling. And that has really allowed for parents to be able to raise their children in the faith and give them an excellent academic education that they're not getting necessarily in the public schools.
If you were to be elected, as the governor of Maryland, do you have any plans on education, what you want to do?
Yes, I want to expand school choice. I think that the governor currently has attempted that with the Boost program by putting money in the budget. Unfortunately, the Boost program has been diminished and is also only narrowly targeted for certain areas of the state that are disadvantaged in the public school system. But I think every parent deserves the opportunity to use a voucher to allow the money to follow their child, so they can choose a homeschool program, or they can choose a Christian school or parochial school program that they trust, that they help to guide with the curriculum, and that they can then make sure their child has the best education. And it's possible because the governor of Maryland has the greatest power of any state in the United States to influence the state budget, because the governor solely develops that budget in Maryland and can light item veto unnecessary spending and add in appropriate spending to areas like school choice. So I intend to do that.
Oh, that's great. I heard some parents, they're concerned if you do school choice, it will impact the strength for the public school. What do you think of that?
No, it's not going to do that, because we just, first of all, they passed so many billions of dollars for the public schools. Do you know Maryland's public schools are some of the highest funded in the world? And when you look at schools in other parts of the world and also in other parts of the United States, we aren't producing in Maryland top scholars like many other places in the world are, and even in the United States, with less funding per pupil. So that's part of the first part of the misnomer. The second part is that the budget funding doesn't have to be cut from public schools if the money follows the child, because look at what they did during the COVID lockdown. They 34% of parents, for instance, withdrew their children because they were furious they weren't getting an education. So they withdrew them from the public schools. That money by law is supposed to follow the child, and so the school lost $16,000 to $19,000 per pupil. But what the state of Maryland did instead was it added in $184 million last year to pay for all those students that left, to give those schools that money. It's called a hold harmless payment. And so the budget is able to be manipulated to make sure that the public schools are not harmed. But I do think a free market will improve. Every time you see school choice, you also see the public schools improving. Why? Because they have to compete. And that's a good thing. We shouldn't be afraid of competition. It's the lack of competition where parents end up with children that can't read, like in Baltimore City, or that are being graduated without proper education and preparation for college. This is a disaster in Baltimore City, for instance, where they're actually passing students. I think it was only 1% could pass the tests, and yet here they were, passing them through the grades, and just a total disaster. And we put $2 billion with a B dollars into the Baltimore City public schools in the last few years. And yet look at the results. And so it's not about the money. It's about making sure that the system is streamlined and competitive and doing what they say they're going to do and providing that education. And that can be done both with school choice and with a leaner budget. For instance, Kerwin passed $32 billion additional educational funding. That's a lot of money coming into the public schools. That's nothing to do with per pupil spending. So on top of the per pupil spending, most of these additional allocations are just filled with cash coming into the public schools right now. So we don't have a cash problem with the public schools. We have an academic problem with actually delivering an education to the children. And that's what school choice provides. So I'm excited about that. And I think we're going to see that. That's the wave of the future.
Yeah, definitely. I think based on the Virginia experience, people are really hungry for the choice of schools. And the public school funding was provided by the property tax of the state, right? So
That's right.
It really should fund the student, not fund the system.
Yes.
Yeah.
Very well said.
How did you manage all the various tasks?
And as a legislator, a lot of people don't know this, but the Maryland legislature has always been for 400 years a part-time legislator made up of citizens who are doing other professions. So you could be like we have in the legislature, we have a farmer, we have a plumber, we have business people, we have women who work in social services, we have people who are very smart and professors and teach in schools. We have lots of teachers in the legislature. We have a police officer, I believe. We have many different people with backgrounds. And the reason for that is because Maryland was, and our system of government is that we are represented by the people. And so we're not to be paid a high amount of money to be a politician. So when a lot of people say, oh, we don't trust the politicians, well, rightly so sometimes, but most of us are just regular folks down in the legislature serving. Then with the family, that's why I'm in politics. If we don't protect our children, we don't have a country. If we don't have a country, my family's exposed to danger. Look at Vietnam right now. Vietnam just came out in the news today where they're cracking down on religion. They're cracking down especially on Christians. That's a communist country. And they are a one-party state, and they control everything. And the end result is you don't have freedom, and you could disappear in the night. Your children could be taken from you because of your faith. And that's not what we believe in America. That's why we have to be part of the process to make sure it never happens here. And I'm very honored. And I believe as governor, we're going to make sure we keep that ship going in the direction of freedom and making sure that people have all of the protections that we deserve under the Constitution. So yeah, it's busy, but you know what? The governor's mansion has some space, so we'll fit 6 kids in there easily. And I'll tell you also, several of our children have already moved out. So our oldest is 24 and he's working in Florida, and our oldest daughter she just graduated from a Bible college in Florida with a sacred music degree and Christian philosophy. And she was going to stay in Florida because she loves DeSantis, the governor, and it was free. But I begged her to come back and work for me. So Patience Faith is working for me on the campaign until we win. And then my other daughter's married. And then so we have about 6 children here at home. So not too many. There's always room for more anyway.
Yeah, I know your dad has 10 kids as well, right?
I'm the oldest of 10, yes.
Okay. And then were you planning to have many kids just from the start?
So when I was engaged, when I gave Valerie the ring and asked her to marry me, we went out for breakfast and spent the day. And one of the things she told me, one of the first things she said was, well, I would like to have 10 children like your mother. And so I said, oh, okay. So I need to go to law school to pay for this. but that's a joke. That's a joke. No, but yeah, we've always been open to God's leading with number of children, and very much believe that children are a blessing. I know a lot of people say, well, debt is a curse and children are a blessing. So why is it that we sign up for the curse and we don't accept the blessings? So we decided to do something different. We did both. We signed up for the debt and we took the children too. And hopefully one day they'll be my retirement plan. So one day they'll take care of me, even if I don't have, even if I don't make a lot of money.
Yeah, I'm really impressed because to homeschool so many kids, and your wife is so beautiful, by the way. She must have a good husband to keep being so beautiful.
She's a sweetheart. She's an angel. And yeah, we wouldn't have it any other way. We love to homeschool. It's a real blessing to do that. We teach them all the subjects, and Valerie is the key instructor and teacher. And she was always smarter than me anyway. I mean, I was the B student in college that helped all the A students be A students. And Valerie, no, I think I graduated University of Maryland with almost a 4.0, but Valerie never got anything less than an A plus. She's very smart, and she did well in college, but she's dedicated her heart to the family and to making sure that her children are raised up in educated well and raised up in the faith. That's the most important thing. I mean, there's nothing that we can take with us to heaven when we go, except by God's grace, the souls of our children.
Well, did you guys meet in college?
Well, we actually were high school sweethearts, and
wow.
So we first met. She was 12, I was 14, and I was in high school, and then we started up being pen pals because she was from the Eastern Shore of Maryland and I was from up here. So we kind of had a long distance friendship for a while, and it grew and blossomed. And then at Liberty University, I was in the decathlon program at the Mount, and I was looking to possibly get a scholarship to Liberty University. And lo and behold, I was down there interviewing, and there was Valerie. She was at the top of her class at Liberty University, and I saw her walking towards me and I melted. And so I, about, I don't know, 8 months later, asked her to marry me.
Wow. Oh, you're so blessed. Yeah.
Yes.
So what are your top priorities if you are elected?
I have a 5-point plan called Contract for Maryland Freedom. And those 5 points are very clear. I want to restore freedom to Maryland by restoring the constitutional guarantees to the people. No more of these executive orders that lock down the state or that bypass the legislature, or no more the courts being closed while the legislature and the executive are operating. Article 8 of the Constitution of Maryland under the Declaration of Rights guarantees to us in Maryland all 3 branches being open and allowing us to have access. And right now, that's not happening in the courts. You cannot have a jury trial in Maryland right now because they've suspended it. And it's not useful, it's not proper, it's not constitutional. I want to restore the Constitution, number 1. Number 2, we need to make sure that CRT is eliminated from our schools and the government, where we don't have a system where we teach equity and we destroy or attack and divide people and teach them that American constitutional history and that Americanism, that American history has been evil. We are a great nation, and it's a great place of freedom. And so we need to teach American exceptionalism from the point of view of teaching kids about their rights. We're the only nation on earth, except for Great Britain, that offers, and Australia, that offers a jury trial, and they don't even offer it as much as we do. We're the ones that offer a jury trial with a civil case and with a criminal case. Well, you can't do that. If you go to really any other country like France or Germany, you don't have a right to a jury. You just have an elitist judge that decides your legal issues. So America has great opportunities. And when you teach American exceptionalism, like the US flag being in classrooms, under Education 7-105 Code of Maryland, the United States flag, this one right here behind me, is supposed to be in every single public school classroom in Maryland. And every single day, all the students are required to stand up, face the flag, and pledge allegiance to the United States, and to have training and teaching in the blessings of our Constitution and our history in America. Well, in many schools, in public schools, particularly places like Montgomery County, they don't even have a US flag in the classroom. They might have a communist flag, they might have a Cuban flag, or they might have some other flag, but they don't, like, some rainbow or BLM flag, but they do not have a United States flag. So one of the things that I'm going to do is end this divisive Marxist teaching in the classrooms as well as in the state, eliminate that CRT, and then require American teaching with the US flag. And of course, if someone has a conscience issue and they don't want to pledge allegiance because of their conscience, maybe they're atheist, or maybe they're Mennonite, or they just don't do that, Maryland law allows them to opt out, but they can't cancel the whole classroom from being part of that process. So that's number 2. Number 3 is making sure of our police and our safety. Do you know right now, Maryland has one of the worst crime rates ever in the United States. It's horrific. Per capita crime and murder is an outrage. And yet, instead of protecting the people and ensuring the police have what they need, the end result is they're trying to defund the police. They're trying to take away the police rights. And in fact, in my committee, I helped stop a measure where they were trying to go after police families to expose their livelihoods and their personal information on the internet through doxing and through what's called MPIAs, or Maryland Public Information Act requests. So we stopped that. But can you imagine being a police officer in Maryland and thinking that your family's, the names of your wife and children and maybe your personal finances are going to be published on the internet? That's an outrage. So we need to defend the police and protect our citizens by creating safe streets immediately and stopping this horrific procedure. And one of the aspects of that, by the way, is making sure our borders are secure and stopping this, the bringing in of unvetted illegal aliens from Texas. They're being flown in right now. And we don't know if they're MS-13, but we've had MS-13 gang members cutting out people's hearts, killing people, dumping them in the woods in my district. It's outrageous. It needs to stop. It's endangering my children. And so I intend to stop that, to immediately end those flights. We're not going to have any flights here with the Biden transitioning of those who are entered the country unlawfully. We're going to make sure that we protect all legal immigrants and make sure that everyone has those same rights and protections of law. I think that we can make sure that we protect everyone's rights, and most importantly, protect the safety of everyone here, and ending that sanctuary state status is important. So I will defund any locality that defies those orders. So the state will withhold money from localities that try to defy and try to make their locality be a sanctuary state, just like President Trump did with San Francisco. We've got to make sure that our cities are safe. And so if Rockville decides to try to say, no, we're going to go ahead and fly people in or bust them in and release them, then they're going to lose funding from the state. That will wake them up and hopefully create a safer environment. And then the last two would be, obviously, reduce taxes and keep our families here. We've got to keep families here. And everybody can just go to Florida and have zero tax. Well, that's not good. We need to make sure we bring people here. And we want to lower taxes and keep our seniors here. I have a plan to do that. You can go to coxforfreedom.com, coxforfreedom.com, and you can see those points there and see the positions and the platform that we have.
People say Maryland is a blue state. So how would you convince those voters or people that a conservative can win in Maryland?
Well, very easily. You just look across the Potomac and you see what happened in Virginia. Beautiful blue Virginia, which is very deep blue now. And yet the large numbers of Republicans that turned out, over 90%, because they're so upset with what's going on, they turned out and they voted. And it was overwhelming. And the Democrats, look, when you look at what Biden is doing, I just saw the recent poll. He's at 19% public approval rating. He's bottoming out, and that's likely to not change by the election time. And so the Democrats are not happy with Biden. When you look at the Democrat approach, they want somebody who's level-headed, who actually does what he promises to do, and who's willing to work across the aisle. And that's who I am. I've always done that in Annapolis. I've passed legislation that worked across the aisle, and we got unanimous votes on some bills that I passed. So I think I'm in a great spot to win this. I believe we're going to win the primary, and I think very easily win the general, because freedom matters. People are fed up. I had Nancy Pelosi's niece endorse me, and you know what she said? I've been a Democrat all my life, she said. And Now I'm going to vote for Republican. I'm voting for you. He said, the reason I'm voting for you is because you believe in freedom and protecting my bodily integrity. And so I'm going to make sure that I vote for you. And she said, I can tell you this, about 25% of the Democrats want to vote for you because no one else is defending their freedom. In the governor's race, you have Franco saying that he's actually going to require greater losses of freedom. You have every single Democrat saying that. And on the Republican side, my opponent supported the Hogan lockdown. So I think we're going to have a freedom movement like you've seen in Virginia and in other states, and I believe we're going to win.
Well, thank you so much. Before we end, do you have some special words you want to say to the Chinese American community?
Well, I thank you for the opportunity. I think that the Chinese American community is the current heroes of the faith in the world. And the reason for that is no other community, to my knowledge, has been so vibrant in Christian faith under such severe persecutions. And so we look to you for inspiration, and we look to you for hope in many ways. And we look to you to inspire ourselves to stand up for what's right and to protect life and to protect liberty and to protect the pursuit of happiness and to protect property rights. And so I am just thrilled with God's work in China and also here in the United States. And I look forward to going. My father has been to China several times because of opportunities he's had as a minister and as someone involved in education. I look forward to, and I've heard wonderful stories, so I look forward to hopefully traveling there someday. But I would say that your voices here in the United States matter, and you need to speak up. I would ask, please speak up for freedom because you will be listened to. There are a lot of moderates and leftists that want to advance their agenda, and they need to be opposed. They need to say, no, that's not the way we're going. And we refuse to let you lead us down the path of statism. It's against God's good order. It's against the American order. It's improper for human dignity and human rights. And we're going to instead preserve the family unit. We're going to make sure we preserve our Bill of Rights and our constitutional liberties and property rights, so we're not burdensome in our taxation. All of these things matter, and I think directly connect to a voice that the Chinese community has. And so I'm so thankful for such a vibrant Chinese community in Maryland. It's great. It's lovely. In fact, I want to send a special thank you to all my Chinese American friends and supporters who helped me. I can't raise money right now. I'm in the session, but who helped me leading up to January 12th. I was able to raise a significant amount because of my Chinese American friends, and they all of you came to help and supported and donated, and that put us in a very strong position. So now we're able to do some great things like advance voter contact. So thank you, and God bless. And anything I can do, let me know. I'm happy to be part of trying to help in that regard to advance whatever needs that the Chinese community has in Maryland. And I would also be curious and interested to meet with any of your friends. If they want to meet offline, I'd be very open to that.
Thank you so much. It was so nice to talk with you and chat, and such a good time. And I wish you all the best in your campaign.
Thank you.
And I also am impressed by your dedication to your faith and to your values, and that's all what matters. Yeah, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you. God bless. Take care, Jenny. Appreciate it.
All right.